which protects judicial independence, for instance, even that can be changed with a simple majority of the parliament of the Knesset, and that was what on the line in March when the
right to
Knesset
vote.
tried.
Everything can be changed in the 61 majority.
Dr. Fuchs, last week in an interview with Wolf Blitzer on CNN, Mr. Netanyahu made the following statement, quote, "What you're talking about is a situation or potential situation where, in American terms, the United States Supreme Court would take a constitutional amendment and say that it's unconstitutional. That's the kind of a spiral that you're talking about, and I hope we don't get to that," unquote. Now, gentlemen, I heard Mr. Netanyahu's statement and then later watched it, and I got to tell you, I got pretty riled up. I mean, that would be ridiculous for our U.S. Supreme Court to come and say part of our Constitution is unconstitutional. I'm laughing because that's just laughable. But then as I was preparing to speak with you, gentlemen, I realized that the interaction between the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Congress, and the U.S. Constitution is much different than their counterparts in Israel. Am I looking at this correctly?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Please explain.
Let's just call what he said inaccurate.
Inaccurate, okay.
Yeah, it's inaccurate. He was right in one point. Our basic laws are our quasi-constitution. They're not a constitution, but they are substitute for a constitution. Since the early 50s, the Knesset decided that because some historical reasons, not to have a constitution on the spot when the country was established.
Yeah.
And then
your colleague, Dr. Rahad, explained that in a prior episode.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So what they decided that we will have the constitution on paragraphs that will go over the years, and then someone will just gather them all up and call them a full constitution. During the years, these basics became more and more important, and the court read them as an existing paragraphs of a constitution. It's not a whole constitution, but it does have a higher normative status. And this is, from my point of view, and from I think the most of the legal scholars in Israel see it was an obvious interpretation of these basic laws. If you read them, you cannot read them otherwise than giving basic right to Israel and giving the court the power of judicial review. So this is what we have. So he's right about that. This is a quasi-constitution. What he is not right is that you have to understand that to amend our basic laws, the only thing our legislator need is to take a bill and to put in the title 2 words, basic law. That's it. They don't need any special majority. Then they have one house. They don't need to take it to 2 houses. Some of the laws can be amended in a simple majority, even not a 61 majority, which is 51%.
I'm sorry. Let me stop you if I may, please.
Yeah.
You tell me that Israel's legislature, the Knesset, with a majority, can change the constitution?
Yes, they can.
You don't have a ratification process, a referendum, national
thing. And we had some comparison research, not just to United States, where it's really hard to amend the constitution, had 2/3 in 2 houses and then 75% of the states.
Yes.
Also in all the countries that have a constitution, which are almost all the countries, to change the constitution, to amend it, you need either a 2/3 majority, either you have to have election between 2 readings, or you have to have a referendum.
Yeah.
There are many issues that make it very hard for the majority just to change all the rules of the game. In Israel, they can just do it in 3 readings in 1 day. And I saw it, because they are doing it, and it's not a theory. In Israel, while in the United States, you didn't have an amendment since 1992, and you had all of it, 26 amendments, which 10 of them were just like
the Bill of Rights.
ratification. Yeah, the Bill
a couple
of
of years after the Constitution. Right. Yeah, you're right.
No, in Israel, let me tell you what happened since the year 2000. Just that. It had 60 amendments to our basic laws. So, and this particular Knesset, which lives like 7 months, changed the basic laws 5 times. Okay, just now they changed it 5 times, and they didn't just change small details. They changed the whole system of the government. For example, just a few years ago, we had that alternate government with 2 prime ministers and all that. I was there in the Knesset when they did it in a week of deliberations. They heard a few
in 1 week of deliberations.
Yes, they heard a few of the experts, and that's it. They voted on it. And also now, this big thing of the reasonableness, as we see it as a major shift of checks and balances in Israel. They did it with 1 month of deliberations in the Knesset. That's it. And it was, it ended almost exactly as it started. They didn't hear any of they hear, but they didn't listen to any of the experts. Nothing was changed. If there was a small change, which was for the worse, and they did it on the coalition majority, of course, 64, but they could do it also on 61 and actually even less. So this is what Netanyahu is referring to as an amendment of the Constitution. It's not. And because of that...
This is nothing like the US. Like, not even close.
Of course. And that's why the court on last decades, it never struck down a basic law. But they said, this is not a constitution amendment. We can check if there is, for example, misuse of constituent power. This can happen when they just legislate something for themselves for no reason or something like that. This is not the case about the reasonableness. At least from my point of view, there are some cases that also suggest that. Maybe Guy can say something about that. But the main thing is that they also said that a constitutional amendment can be against the core values of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. So this
is wild. Wow.
They have power to legislate. They have power to change the basic laws, but they don't have a power to establish a new state on a 61 majority in 3 readings in 1 day. This is irrational. They can ratify a law which has basic law monarchy. They can do it. So what should the Supreme Court say? Well, this is a basic law. I cannot do anything. The Supreme Court said, no, if there will be a law that will go against their heart, against the core values of Israel, I might someday invalidate it. They never did it until now. They do it this time. I don't know if you already heard, this will be the first time in history that the hearing will be on September, and they already decided that it will be a full panel of 15 judges, which never happened in Israel. So this is a first hint that they take it very, very seriously. Or at least the Chief Justice Chayut, she decided that it will be a full panel. And a twist, from my point of view, and some others, although there is a lot of controversy on that, I think that this is the first time that the Supreme Court will say this basic law is invalid. It goes against the heart of democracy in Israel, and I think that they will invalidate it. But of course, we cannot know.
As a side note, as I told you, I spoke with your colleague, Dr. Ahad of the Israel Democracy Institute several months ago, and he talked about Israel's, and I'm using his words here, gentlemen, poor system of checks and balances. And I see that. It's nothing like what we have in the US, not that our system is perfect. Dr. Lurie.
If I may jump in.
Yes, please.
If I may jump in, just adding a few words. I think one of the fragility or the poor system of checks and balances, you can see even in the basic law that governs the judiciary in Israel, the basic law of the judiciary, which says that which protects judicial independence, for instance, even that can be changed with a simple majority of the parliament of the Knesset, and that was what on the line in March when the
right to
Knesset
vote.
Tried.
Everything can be changed in the 61 majority. The thing that we have, everyone has one vote. Everything can be changed. All the basic rights, all the powers of the judiciary, powers of the government, powers of the Knesset, everything can be changed, and everything is theoretically just is on the goodwill of 61 people.
When you talk about basic rights, Dr. Fuchs, that makes me think of our Declaration of Independence, where we talk about, truths to be self-evident, our unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every school kid knows that. Everyone knows that. It's not law, but we sort of take it as our basic rights. I recently watched a presentation you gave back in March. It was titled Understanding Judicial Reform in Israel. And in it, you talked about Israel's Declaration of Independence back in 1948, if I'm correct on that year. So, gentlemen, what I wanted to know in the remaining minute of this segment is this. Is Israel's Declaration of Independence sort of inspirational and aspirational for Israelis? Do kids say it? And is it something that is cited? I don't think it's law, is it?
It's not law.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think it's not enough inspirations for kids, I have to say, but it is an inspiration to the court, and it has been an inspiration to the courts during its first years when they established just a common law Bill of Rights based on that Declaration of Independence. It wasn't like a constitution. They never strike down any laws, but they did interpret the laws in order to give way to the rights that were written and even the rights that were not written in the Declaration of Independence, because they read it and they say, well, we see that this is a democracy. Democracy is not written there, but the values of democracy are written there. It says full equality for all its citizens, respecting freedom of religion and all that. It looks like a declaration that establishes a liberal democracy. Also, nation state for the Jewish people, of course. The term Jewish and democratic was later, a lot later, but it was clear from the Declaration of Independence that the people who wrote it, they wanted to establish a state which is Jewish, but also liberal democracy. And this was an inspiration to the court, and it's still an inspiration to the court, because in a way, what I told you earlier, that the court says that in a very extreme situation, they will say that a law is unconstitutional. In a way, they also take it from the Declaration of Independence, which gives inspiration and shows that this is a liberal democracy and also a nation state of the Jewish people.
And in many ways, that's similar to our Declaration of Independence. Dr. Lurie, did you have anything to add before we go to our final segment here?
One correction on the issue of the selection of judges that I wanted to make. I forgot to mention when we mentioned the comparison and the selection systems, that there are, of course, systems in which the government, particularly common law systems, where the government can appoint ostensibly by its own discretion the Supreme Court justices, but it does so in many cases after professional screenings or professional vetting of the candidates, and the government can only appoint from those candidates. So only if some listeners from common law systems are listening, that's why we said that again. The government in these cases is also, in fact, in practice, is checked by the professionals in the system.
Yeah, which is a good system. Let's take a break here. Stay with me and Dr. Lurie and Fuchs as we get into the perspective. All right.